Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping in to an Oatmeal Stout from Listermann Brewing Company. Listermann Brewing Company, we've had a lot of different beers from them. Really good brewers. They brew a big array of different beers. They're based in Cincinnati, Ohio. Today is an Oatmeal Stout that has a laundry list of ingredients. 7% ABV on this one. It's called Shamrock Shake, brewed with oatmeal, Irish cream, coffee, cacao, chocolate, and lactose. In case you're wondering, cacao and chocolate no, they're not the same thing. Chocolate is a mix of cacao and sugar. That combination is what we call chocolate. Cacao is the cacao from the bean, from the plant, from the tree, from which the main ingredient of chocolate is derived. So distinctly different. One's got sugar added, one does not. So, in terms of label art, Shamrock Shake, got a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow there, kind of get you in the mood. So let's get this cracked gently. All right, that seemed gentle enough. That's fine, I can get that cap later. Let's get this poured right in the old stout glass. Oh yeah, look at this. It's a golden stout. Okay, so I see what they're doing with this. All right. There it goes. Having no problem forming a head. Visually, yeah, it's golden. Exactly as they stated. Looks really lovely. In terms of carbonation, a few little medium small bubbles, mostly very tight and fine. Obviously, it formed a nice little creamy head here. Let's get right up over it for a good sniff. Oh, wow, yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a lot happening in terms of aroma here. Mostly what's coming through to me is this slight underlying suggestion of sweetness, some kind of fruity accents coming through, and a bit of that Irish cream. Not really picking up the chocolate, I'm not picking up the cacao, but the Irish cream is definitely coming through. A little bit of the coffee on the end as well. Yeah, it smells quite nice. Almost has a little suggestion of a booziness to it. 7%, that's not super high, but it's not super low either. So without further ado, let's just jump right in and see what this one's about. Yeah, it smells great. Mm. Ooh, that's a big beer. There's a lot happening in that. Layers and layers of flavor. Just going to let those continue to develop for a minute here. Yeah, there's a lot of action in this. A lot of ingredients, and they really all come to play. They work beautifully together, but they all do distinctly come through and have their own voice. So the balance on this is exceptional. So before we get into specifics on the flavor profile, let's talk about the body and the mouthfeel. The body on this, it feels like a heavier beer. 7%, it's not super high. They didn't call this an Imperial Stout. It's not really in that range. It's higher certainly than your normal stout, but it's not up to really what most people would term that Imperial threshold. It's kind of somewhere in the middle, but it's got a good weight to it, a good presence. In terms of the mouthfeel, very resistant and absolutely silky smooth. It does feel very thick as you agitate around the palate. Indeed, it feels as though it thickens as you agitate around the palate. So it's got a tremendous presence, both in terms of the weight and in terms of the mouthfeel. And it really feels like a big stout. So what do you get on that first sip? Well, the first thing you notice right away is that Irish cream and that coffee. Those two flavors come out and they hit very well together. I think some of those underlying fruity accents I was picking up are actually coming from the coffee bean. I don't know what exact type of bean that they used, but it does taste like it's got the coffee side of it. It's got some fruity undertones to it. So some kind of bean that definitely has some fruity accents that become apparent. In terms of the chocolate and the cacao, the chocolate definitely does taste like chocolate, and it really is binding very much with the coffee in this beer. And the cacao, really with these other ingredients added, I can't say, oh yeah, that's definitely cacao. The chocolate tastes like chocolate, but it doesn't taste sweet. It just tastes like chocolate. Remember, they added lactose in this, so it is going to let these flavors actually open up and taste like they normally do. I'm guessing the cacao is somewhere in the background, binding with that coffee underneath and adding some of these earthy undertones to it. So overall, what does this taste like? It tastes really exactly as advertised. It's like coffee that's got chocolate added and Irish cream. So if you were to take, a standard cup of coffee, add Irish cream to it, and add chocolate and obviously some sweetener, in this case lactose, that would come close to approximating kind of the flavor profile that's in this beer. It's very, very nice, very well chosen ingredients. All of them work very well together, and they all distinctly do have their own voice. The only asterisk there, maybe just a little bit of cacao. It's hard to pick out and say that's cacao, but there's this underlying kind of, don't want to say roasty, but it's more of an earthy sense that's kind of binding to the underpinning of the coffee bean. That's where I'd like to think the cacao is coming through, but very, very nice. In terms of the finish, it does have a longer than average finish to be certain, but this is not an imperial stout. Despite how big and bold these flavors are, and despite still being 7% ABV, that's not low. It does have a longer than average, but it's not like barrel-aged imperial kind of territory by any mean. Not dry at all. It's very wet, very round to the end, and it's got a relatively normal bell curve shape, and where it kind of drives out on the end is as it just kind of finishes off, and there's just kind of this natural decay to the flavors. Just a little bit of haunting lingering on the palate. That's mostly coming from the Irish cream and from the coffee. Very, very nice beer. Very well done. Don't get a ton of golden stouts out in the marketplace. I try all of them when I see them come across my Tavour feed, and if I'm out at, say, Total Wine or something, they're hard to come by. Little bit of a unicorn beer, but they're not as rare as others, but very, very nice. I've enjoyed all of them that I've tried. So we're going to jump back in here. We're going to have a second sip, let these flavors intensify, pick it apart again, make sure I didn't miss anything, and see what the second sip's about. Yeah, coffee and Irish cream right up front. A couple seconds later, the chocolate really opens up. Distinctly tastes like chocolate, coffee, and Irish cream. Those three very, very present. There is an underlying scent of maltiness. Even though it's golden, it's still a stout, so there's a good bit of malt in here. Yeah, slight suggestions of fruity undertones. That coffee, that earthiness, slight bitters are starting to open up. The flavor has already gone well past its peak, and it's on its slow decay. So as it decays, there's a lot more kind of bitter that pops into this beer, which I personally really, really appreciate. Even though it's got lactose in it, they still added the ingredients in here, so letting the bitter speak, I really appreciate. So there's a lot of different flavor components that happen here, and you get completely different sensory experiences from all of them. And on the very end, it is coffee, Irish cream. I mean, maybe just still a slight suggestion of chocolate, and it's got that slow decay, and there's just kind of lingering bitters on the back as well. A very, very nice beer. This is very tasty, well put together. The ingredients that they chose all work well together, and in a golden stout format, I'm a big fan. I'm going to take my time, sip on this one, call it my scores. When we come back, we'll get this beer ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. This was Listermann Brewing Company's Shamrock Shake, a golden oatmeal stout brewed with Irish cream, coffee, cacao, chocolate, and lactose, clocking in at 7% ABV. Listermann Brewing is based in Cincinnati, Ohio. Okay, so first things first, this was a very, very good beer. There was a lot to like about it. I had had a similar beer that they brewed that was kind of an Irish cream style cream ale, very similar vein, but this in a golden oatmeal stout, I think worked arguably even better. Had a little more presence, a little more heft, a little higher ABV, which just gave the beer a lot more legs upon which to stand, especially with that laundry list of ingredients. So starting with the aroma on this beer was fantastic. You could smell some subtle kind of fruity notes coming off of it, which I do still think came from the coffee, the specific type of coffee bean that they used in this beer. But you could smell very clearly the coffee and the Irish cream and the chocolate. Smelled very, very good. All of the aromas came through, and certainly much more prevalent than your average golden oatmeal stout, to be certain. Overall, the aroma well above average. It gets an 8 out of 10. For the taste, I absolutely loved it. Golden Stouts are a little trickier to find, but you can still find them if you look hard enough. And what a great selection of ingredients. Obviously, the goal is to make a coffee with Irish cream style beer. They added in the cacao and the chocolate and the lactose. The lactose to me is a really critical ingredient addition because it lets all of the underlying ingredients have their own voice and actually taste like they do. Without lactose, without that sweetness, things get muddled, and sure, you can taste elements of flavors, but you know, it's got to have that, especially the chocolate. It will never taste like chocolate without lactose in the beer. It will just come off bitter. You'll be able to get the earthy side, but you'll never have something that actually tastes like chocolate. I loved it. I think they nailed the flavor profile. Gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the body, this had some heft to it. 7%, not super high, but it's not super low either. It felt really weighty. Gets a 10 out of 10. For the mouthfeel, this was one of those that was just silky, silky smooth. As you agitated it, it got even thicker on the palate. Felt absolutely fantastic. Mouthfeel gets a 10 out of 10. For the finish, pretty big, bold beer and a lot of ingredients, and they were quite prevalent. Definitely extended the length of the finish on this beer. You don't normally associate a stout, unless it's been barrel aged, with a very long finish, but there were a lot of big, bold, pungent ingredients in here, and it did have a much longer than average finish on the end, to be certain. Well above average finish, gets an 8 out of 10. For the head and retention, this one did a pretty good job. I imagine pulled off of a nitro tap, it would have been fantastic. As a word poured from a bottle, above average, it gets a 7 out of 10. For the appearance, this was classic Golden Stout, gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the balance, I alluded to this when talking about the flavor profile, but yeah, all of the added ingredients had their own voice. There was even that classic malty undertone that you got from the Golden Stout, so everything really was well balanced throughout. You could taste everything independently. That's just a masterclass of how to balance a beer. Balance gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible, subjectively, I loved it, 10 out of 10. Finally, is an example of the style. Overall, this beer did very well, only lost a few points in a few categories, nothing hypercritical, and I think it did earn and deserve the perfect 10 out of 10 I gave as an example of the style, which does bring the total score on Listermann Brewing Company's Shamrock Shake to a 93 out of 100. So this is just one of those beers. If you're a fan of golden stouts or flavored stouts or coffee stouts, Irish cream in beers, any of those subsets, this one's definitely worth keeping on your radar. Absolutely fantastic. I've had a ton of beers by Listermann, and they do a bunch of different things with their beers. This one was top tier. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live, just turn on your notifications, hit that bell icon. It's right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.